So let me tell you what we'll do the next half an hour, just in case you thought you could sit quietly and look at your WhatsApp. Okay, we're gonna make it interactive. I want to have a conversation with all of you. So anybody who has a point or a question, do feel free to come up with it as we go through this process. And in case you don't have questions, I might point and say, Chandu, will you ask the question, etc. So putting you on the spot. So please ensure that you make it engaging. I just want to start from where Arundhati actually left, which is this whole issue of how long will it take us to get parity. And listening to her 156 years, the next Mahakumbh will come in probably 144. So we will better make sure we get full parity, if not women's superiority before that. I think that's important. I'd first of all like to thank you very much, Vijay, because whenever I give him an idea of saying, why don't we do this discussion? The question is never why, but when. So I think this is absolutely amazing. And throughout my 40-year career in corporate sector, I've always looked at the Madras Management Association as the absolute beacon of excellence in everything to do with management thought, no question. And having continued to serve on the National Council of the All India Management Association, I think we're very proud of the role that MMA plays. Similarly, very proud of what FICCI Flow does. In fact, in Pune, some 2 years back, I was threatened that they would make me an honorary woman of FICCI Flow. So I just escaped that one because I've done a lot of work with FICCI Flow, both in Delhi, Calcutta, and of course in Pune where I live. So it's absolutely amazing the kind of work you're doing. And I'm sure you'll continue to inspire young and old women all over the country because that is what we really need. But just to touch on the point that I think Arundhati was mentioning, this whole issue of how do we kind of typify women. And I'll give you the example of our own daughter. Okay, she's now a cancer scientist in Sloan Kettering Hospital in New York. And I remember when she was getting married, she married an English boy they both met in Cambridge in UK. And the first discussion was, how would the marriage be conducted? Now, one concession she made to me, because proud Indian father, is that, look, you do the wedding as grandly as you want, in whatever style you want, in whichever city you want. Of course, we chose Jaipur. But where we got stuck was, how should the wedding be conducted? And logically, I mean, all of us are familiar with the traditional religious customs that go into weddings. But she was very clear that, look, if you look at the history of India, as per the Vedic rites, there was never a mention of God. It was more in terms of responsibilities. There was no concept of this thing that we call the Kanyadan. She said, I would never want my father to give me away. What does give me away mean? So we had these fundamental arguments. And of course, like all Tamil families, we had a nice family Vadyar who came to our house. He listened to this discourse by my daughter and said, this one is not for me. I mean, I'm still your priest, but not this one. So we were actually at our wits' end saying, oh, who's going to conduct this wedding in the exact method that she wants, but complete equality of the genders, etc., etc. And we found this amazing group of priests called Gyan Prabodhini. I don't know if any of you have heard of them. Brilliant women priests in Pune. And the two women priests actually came to Jaipur and conducted the function. And my 89-year-old uncle was there. And first he was like, no, these women priests are going to conduct your daughter's wedding. I said, yes. Yes. He says, I'm going to sit next to you and watch and make sure they make no mistakes. I said, sure. And at the end of it, he gave us all a certificate saying these people were really fantastic. I learned so much more today in this wedding than I learned in maybe, attending 50 weddings a year across. So it's actually interesting to find that revelation. So when we started putting the authors together for this book, and Uma and I actually did a lot of research with members of the Pune International Center and people we know, etc., like Pooja, for instance. And we said, let's get a mix of people with various thoughts in the book. And the first one we chose was a woman priest. Okay, there is a lady called Ika Chaturvedi Banerjee who's written the first chapter of this book. Ika, by the way, was the CEO of the Future Group. So she's not like, she grew up as a priest. But through sheer interest in mythology and sheer interest in what she do, in fact, I was just talking to her last week. She just come back from Varanasi after conducting a full wedding. And I was asking her, how do you find the time to do it juggling? She said, this is my passion. That really bringing the best of thinking on gender equality, etc., to even weddings in this country. So I was reminded of my daughter's wedding, as I said, in 2013. So things are really changing for the better. So if I give you a quick tour of what we have done in this book, it's actually in 3 parts. If you read the book, it'll be continuous, but I'm giving you the thinking. One is Ika. As I said, she's really talked about right from the 3 Shaktis that we talked about to mythology through the ages and how have women been both placed on a pedestal, at the same time, sometimes put in their place. So I think it's important to differentiate what's good about and what's bad, even about mythology. And she's kind of done that extremely well. Then, of course, we had quite a few economists. I mean, we got the two best economists we know. Ajit Ranade, who was the Vice Chancellor of the Gokhale Institute of Finance. He's been the Principal Economic Advisor to the Aditya Birla Group and so many others. And Ijaz Ghani, who was the Principal Economist for Developing Economies in the World Bank. And they wrote the second chapter on, how does the economic construct of equality of women really come through? And then, of course, we got our gurus of the Pune International Center, both Padma Vibhushans, Dr. Raghunath Mashelkar, one of India's foremost scientific administrators, and Dr. Vijay Kelkar, who, of course, was the chairman of the Finance Commission and brought in from a scientific background to be part of the finance ministry, and the Kelkar committees are very well known for the very revolutionary policies they came forward. And these two gentlemen are in Pune and they run the Pune International Center. So we got them to write about it. And then we got the chambers of commerce to add their own thoughts on what are being done for women, etc., etc. Arundhati, of course, led the thinking on how corporate sector has both dealt with women and how women have dealt with the corporate sector. I joined the board of State Bank of India 2 years after Arundhati was chairman, so I did not have the privilege of working with her. But even today, if you go to State Bank, people remember some policies, including something as elementary as in State Bank of India, once you become a chief general manager, everybody starts wearing a suit. So I think sometimes I used to joke with them that even they probably go to sleep in their suits as well. Everybody has this chief general manager upwards, everybody is wearing a suit. And Arundhati, I believe, and I don't know this, but I mean, she's one of those legends. She came in and said that, look, why is the temperature of the boardroom in State Bank of India always at 20 to 21? Because all the men are wearing suits. So for a woman who's wearing a sari and doesn't want to wear a sweater, she said, look, the temperature will now be maintained at 24, which, by the way, is a good thing for the country because we all waste too much time on excessive air conditioning of hotel rooms, etc., etc. But something as trivial as that. To many of the policies she kind of enacted to make sure that people who join as probationary officers can stay on. And some of the points she made were absolutely stunning. Equality, for instance. Okay, this is again something we see in our daughter's family because it's completely equal. Bringing up their son, managing the housework, doing the laundry. There is nothing that is not shared by my son-in-law Hugh and my daughter Karuna because both of them are extremely busy. My son-in-law is the chief data scientist of MasterCard in New York. And both of them have extremely successful careers. So there's no excuse for saying, look, I'll support you because I don't have enough to do. But I think that is really what makes things happen. And we got a couple of other very bright corporate success stories. Sushma Rajagopalan, who grew up right here in Gopalpuram and was now living in Philadelphia in the US, about her own career as being the CEO of 3 successive companies. I mean, 2 in the US and then 1 in India and now back in the US. We have an amazing woman called Nikki Barua. Nikki is actually a young Assamese woman who went to the US nearly 12 years ago, started working there, married another Mexican woman. Okay, they have a wonderful marriage in New York. And these two are actually building an entity which works with women all over the world. It's called Beyond Barriers. That how can women destroy perceived barriers, as Arundhati said, in their own mind, as well as in other people's minds and behavior around them, and really shatter those glass ceilings. So I think there are a lot of corporate stories we've come up with. But something I'm personally very passionate about is the entrepreneurs we feature in the book. Because there are so many women entrepreneurs who have been extremely successful. And we have actually 3 of them right here. So I will take this opportunity to ask them about their journeys. But entrepreneurial women have actually broken every barrier and been extremely successful. So let me start with Pooja. Pooja, tell us a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey. And then we will talk about what you're doing today.
Thank you, Ganesh. Thank you so much for inviting me here. It's such a privilege. So I started my journey as an engineer, worked in the Bay Area for many years with Adobe, and then did 3 startups at different stages of life. The first startup was in the Bay Area, an enterprise software company for which we raised a lot of money, and it went under in the big meltdown of 2001. The second was in India, in a company called IntelliTots in early years education and care. And that company we built with my batchmate from IIT Delhi over 9 years. That company got acquired by Clay. And the third company is called Avishkar. It is a platform to help children learn robotics, AI, and coding. We set up about 2,500 labs in schools in India and about 15 other countries. And as now in hindsight, when I think about the entrepreneurial journey, I feel it's like playing a game. And when you're playing a game, it is important to know what you're playing and, more importantly, why you're playing it. Somehow the entrepreneurial journey has also become synonymous with fundraising and high growth venture capital funding, and that's kind of considered the only way to build a business. And when I think about my three companies, I feel like all of them were at different stages of life, and it meant that they were structured very differently. So the first one, we raised a lot of funding, and it was like a rocket ship. The second one, I had two children at that time. We just moved back to India. My children were 1 and 3 years old, and I knew what it meant to take money from an investor. So I said, look, the biggest thing I need right now is flexibility, and therefore we will not take any money. We build it sustainably, profitably. We had positive PAT and EBITDA by the end of it, and we were able to sell it. But during those 9 years, I almost did not identify myself as an entrepreneur. It just felt like you are not, because you've not raised the funding and you've not done the kind of the regular the path that you associate entrepreneurship with. So I think the important thing is to know why you are building a company and when, and that determines the kind of company you are building, the pace at which you are building, and whether you raise funding for it or not. As far as being a woman is concerned, for a large part of my career, I was pretty much gender blind, where I kind of did not even occur in my mind that I was a woman entrepreneur. But I think in the last decade, as I saw my two daughters growing up, and while mentoring a lot of other entrepreneurs and business leaders, I began to see that there were these systemic barriers that women entrepreneurs were really struggling with, whether it was access to networks, access to capital, and even expectations of themselves and others' expectations of them, just like Arundhati mentioned today. We, on a daily basis, have to question some of those expectations. So you will come across a lot of women entrepreneurs who will say, look, I'm okay keeping it small because I have so much going on. There will be women entrepreneurs who are, they are revenue positive, they are EBITDA positive, growing rapidly, but will say, no, I don't think we are ready for high growth at this stage or raising funding. So I think the mindset is a big barrier, along with a lot of other systemic barriers like funding, access to capital, networks, and also skills in many cases around financial management skills.
Thanks, Pooja. Pooja also runs a very interesting company called Udayti, which we'll talk about in the second part of this conversation. But let me shift to you, Anushka. So I know that you are now a very famous name in children's books, but where did it start and what is your journey?
Right. Thank you so much for inviting me, and also thank you for introducing me as a nonsense pioneer in India, because then you won't expect too much sense from me. So I started off actually as in software, but at some point I decided that what I wanted to do was, I realized that there weren't enough books for children written by Indian authors, and children were all like, we all grew up reading books from the West, and there was definitely a gap there. So, I didn't think of starting a company then, but I started writing books for children. And I started working in publishing. I was working with Tara Publishing here, and then went on to work in Scholastic in Gurgaon. And as we were working there, we realized that, the trouble with big corporate publishing houses is that, they're only looking at the bottom line, right? So Scholastic, for instance, had a lot of books coming in from America, mostly books that, they didn't want there. So they were dumping them in India. And also they didn't have the kind of books they wanted to do were the kind of books that would sell. Unfortunately, the parents in India want activity books and books, educational books. And we really felt that we needed books. That kind of book doesn't encourage children to want to read. So we wanted to, we'd keep talking about this, my colleague and I. She was the publishing director and I was an editor there. And we used to keep talking about it while we were at Scholastic, that, wish we could do really good, fun books for children. Because the books that used to sell well were either mythology and stuff like that, because everybody wants their children to learn Indian culture. Or activity books, because everybody thinks that, children need to be dumped with knowledge all the time. So there was nothing that was just fun for them to read. So at some point later, many years later, we both found ourselves at a point, we were both in the same place, and we both found ourselves at a point where we were, wondering what to do next. So we thought this was the right time, and that's how we started Duckbill. And we had some basic things, like we didn't do books for really small children because there were a lot of publishers doing that. In fact, Chennai is the place where 3 of the best independent children's publishers for smaller, they do mostly picture books and stuff. They're in Chennai, and they're all owned by women, by the way. They're all started by women. That's beside the point. The point is that we didn't want to do the same thing again, so we decided we do older books, and we would not do mythology, we would not do folk tales because the market was flooded with them. So basically what we did was that we found a gap. We weren't thinking of it in terms of the market, honestly. We both come from the editorial writing kind of side of things. So we weren't thinking in terms of market and things like that. We were thinking in terms of what do the children need, right? What do we want children to read? So we started, so that's where the idea of starting the publishing house came from. Not at all from a commercial perspective. If you want to make money, children's publishing is not what you do. That's for sure. So then when we started Duckbill, initially it was a part of a bigger publishing house, but later on we bought our shares and we went independent. It was a very small, very lean company, but we used to do, we were very happy with the kind of books we did. And if I may be a little immodest here, I think it has really changed it has really been it's changed the way children's publishing is done in India, because we started doing genre books, and we found new authors. So it was a very exciting time, but then GST happened. Honestly, GST is what led to the thing that, because what happens is books are not books don't come under GST, but all the other things that all the other vendors do. So our prices went up. We couldn't take the input, whatever the return that you get from the GST. And so it became very difficult to sustain. So when we were offered, we were very unhappy, to be honest, that we had to sell. But when we were offered, we got a really good offer from Penguin. We decided to go for it. Also because they agreed to keep the imprint, and my colleague continues to run it. So see, for us, it didn't come so much as we really, as she said, we didn't think of ourselves as entrepreneurs. We thought of ourselves as writers, editors who wanted good books out there. So that's where we came from. And so for us, we're just happy that the books are still being done by Penguin and with the same kind of same kind of vision. So that was my entrepreneurial journey. I continue to write books for children, but that's an entirely different line of things.
So Uma, let me ask you a question. Already questions from the audience. Well, thank you very much for that. And you've nicely distributed 2 questions each to each of the speakers. So we'll take that as it comes. But I want to, Uma, paraphrase this by talking about your own journey. I mean, Uma, as you heard in the biodata, was the CEO of ZTV's education business, then became the Chief Corporate Development Officer of HSBC globally for what they call their outsourcing business called GR, Global Resourcing. And then she decided to give it all up and start a company in Pune called Global Talent Track. And GGT is actually one of those entrepreneurial dream stories, because started off, then within 2 years raised money from 2 companies, There was a company called Intel Capital and Helion Ventures. After some time, raised more money from Cisco Ventures or Cisco Capital, and finally bought them out. And quite recently, about 6 months back, raised money from a private equity venture called SMCV and has listed on the Bombay Stock Exchange 1 month back. So it is one of those interesting stories of going through 3 rounds of funding and finally listing on the Bombay Stock Exchange. It is almost like a dream for everybody. So in this journey, and I know you've had 2 CEOs, but you worked very closely with them. The question that Rahul from Alwarpet is asking is, what are the most impactful ways for women to support each other in entrepreneurship? Today, you're doing a lot of work also in women's entrepreneurship and GDD Foundation. And how do you ensure that the women that work with you are also becoming leaders, have their own networks and mentorships and contribute? And how does mentorship contribute to this?
Okay, thank you for asking that question. So this whole journey of wanting to be an entrepreneur for me was wanting to do something different from what I was very happy doing for the first 25 odd years of my life. And there came a time when I felt that when I was the CEO for ZTV, Z Education, we're doing a lot of things on TV, off TV, in the field, etc. But I just felt that I needed some kind of a channel for my personal intellectual stimulation. And that's when went and signed up for, as an external student, IIT Bombay accepted us as PhD students. I motivated Ganesh also to sign up for the PhD program. And so, there were these standard programs which you have to do as part of the prerequisites, which we somehow managed to finish. And then came the tougher part, which is to research, to create your own hypothesis, and to be able to create a new body of knowledge. And that meant a lot of time to be spent. And my guide was very clear. One day I received a call from him saying, look, you're going to be stuck off your roles if I don't see you in the campus at least once a week. And then tell me what is the progress you're making. Well, that is how I used to deal with my people. But nobody in the last at least 10 years of my life had told me that this is what expected of me. So that led to a lot of soul searching. And I told one fine day I visited him and I met with him and I realized that he was really serious. And that was quite an affront to me as an individual about who I am. And somebody mentioned a little while ago about my personal identity. So I was having this dilemma. And then one fine day, I just told Mr. Subhash Chandra, I'm moving on. And what are you going to do next? I'm just going to do my studies. I'm going to go back to, this IIT Bombay, which has given me this opportunity. I want to finish my PhD. So he was surprised. Everybody was surprised. My family was surprised. Ganesh was also surprised. But I said, this is what I want to do. So once I did that PhD program, I really, really enjoyed that whole process. It really gave me a lot of scope to think about who I am as an individual and what is it that I really want to do for the rest of my life. I realized that it was not the power, it was not the power of network, it's not the ability to make money, which were really motivating for me, but it is the ability to make a difference in some way to lives of people. And something that I was familiar with in terms of how the youth of the country, they could be molded and given new direction. That's a path that I realized I wanted to get into. And while, we start the journey, I realized very soon that it's just not me who is passionate about it and is going to make things happen. You require a team, you require commitment, and you require a similar passion. And fortunately, managed to bring those teams together. Yes, there were some people who have stayed on for many years, and some people found the journey. After some time, they moved on from that journey to start their own enterprise or go work somewhere else. But what is truly heartening is that in this journey of last more than a decade, we have had the opportunity to build leaders of tomorrow and who have not only for ourselves, but for the country. And that's the way I look at it. And so I'm really thrilled and delighted to let you know that one such leader from our organization is very much present here. She joined us as a trainer, and today she is the leader. Kanchana, if you can just put up your hand, please. Yeah, she is one of our leaders. She's handling the entire South operations, and she is responsible for the income generation and the numbers that we deliver year on year to the tune of 25% of what we do in the country. She takes care of. So there are many such leaders we have been able to build along the way. And it's not only in the context of corporate leadership, but when I look at our own ecosystem, where women are not able to earn even the money that they earn, the meager amount they earn, they are not able to have the opportunity to spend the way they want, and is something that their husbands, other members, the male members of the family, take it away from them. And therefore, we need, like Arundhati said, we just need not only women leaders, but we need male leaders also who are sensitive about the change that is required to be brought about in the community. And again, I'm delighted to find that we have many male leaders who think alike and who feel committed towards this kind of a cause, which is what we are trying to do through our foundation now. And so it's all about finding people who are passionate, willing to learn, and also feeling joyful about their success and being able to create that magic together. That is what has been the reason for my happiness in the last decade.
Thanks, Suman. That's very, very useful. And I'm going to switch back to Pooja, and because Pooja is now working in this entity called Udayati, which is actually doing great work on policy. So I'm going to ask her to talk a little bit about what she's doing and answer two very interesting questions around policy that have come up. Pooja.
So I'll go back to where Arundhati ended, which is it will take us 134 years to close the gender gap. That's internationally, we've talked about it. For India, we don't have that much time. We've been talking about the demographic dividend that we have, and that's a big advantage for us as a country. We want to become this $30 trillion economy by 2047. But this demographic dividend will not last forever. It is a 20-year, 2-decade thing that if we do not tap into it, we could be trapped in a middle income country trap. And it's very hard to get out from there. And a large part of this demographic dividend is actually gender dividend. As Uma mentioned, when you look at the STEM graduates in the country, 42% are STEM graduates. The data that just came out a few months ago, 51% of undergraduate enrollments in science is women. 52% of employable workforce in India is women. So we are sitting on this huge reservoir of talent that is willing and able to contribute to our economic growth. But because of challenges on the demand side, we are not able to take advantage of that. So, mindsets and norms are one issue, and I'll get to that. There are some questions here. But there are some challenges on the demand side that we need to address, which is around hiring, retention, advancement, return to work, and infrastructure. In fact, Chennai, Tamil Nadu is one of the states really leading it here. 42% of the women in manufacturing in India are in Tamil Nadu. 90% of workforce in electronics manufacturing is women in Tamil Nadu. Why is that? Because Tamil Nadu has been able to create structural mechanisms and the enabling infrastructure to make it happen. So there are working women's hostels, and that we are trying to copy that in other states as well. Because in the budget this year, there was allocation for working women's hostels across India. Tamil Nadu has a great model already. You have here something called the Working Women's Hostel Urban Corporation. And so the structure exists, it has been done, it needs to be replicated across the country. So one whole kind of policy push is around re-enabling infrastructure. When we look at women's employment, and Uma, then if you work so much in that area, you would see that there is the big challenge when it comes to women's employment is either the jobs have to go where the women are, because a man can go on a bike 30 kilometers to his job. For a woman, that radius is 1 kilometer, right? So either the job has to go to the woman, or if the woman comes to the job, then we need to provide safe accommodation, safe and affordable mobility, childcare services. And so there is a lot of work to be done as a country on the infrastructure, which the government is very aware. We are working with the Ministry of WCD on the allocation of this of the budget with the state governments around the infrastructure. The second point that, and it is not still a problem solved. The second point I want to make is, I've come to believe that there is a monetary threshold at which patriarchy can be smashed. So what I've heard over and over and over again is, when a woman starts working, there is a lot of pushback. Who is going to now get water? So the monetary cost of a woman stepping out of a house, or a girl, 18-year-old girl stepping out of the house to work, is much higher than that for a man. So if you give a woman 15,000 rupees a month, the mother or the mother-in-law at home is going to say, why are you doing this? Who will not take care of the siblings? Who's going to teach them? So the tuition costs, getting water from somewhere, cooking, taking care of older parents, grandparents, the cost is very high. When a boy is going out for 15,000 rupees a month, the family isn't taken. Having said that, if a woman stays in the job, in the career 1 or 2 years, then the trajectory just takes off and she grows much faster. So there is this problem of these first 1 or 2 years that we need to take care of. So anywhere where organizations have been able to retain women, especially at this strata, the salary structure, they have to make more than 25,000 rupees a month, so that they can send some money back home. When money starts to come into the home, then families say, "Acha, ठीक है, तुम करो, मैं देख लूंगी बच्चों को. I will take care of the kids," right? So you begin to see the shift happen even at home when you begin to earn beyond a certain level. So I really think that there is an honor income trade-off. You reach a certain level of income, and then you can break that norm. And the last point I will make here is, despite that, in urban areas, highly professionally qualified women, they step out of the workforce, right? We know so many of them, and Arundhati touched upon it, कि हम लोग सब कुछ करते हैं. We will take in 50% of the women. By the time we reach senior management, we hit 4%, 5%, right? And that has to do with, Indra Nui once said, our biological clock and career clock is at odds with each other. There is that decade when you are doing your caregiving, taking care of children, you want to be there for expectations that we have. But just like to Ganesh's point, the temperature in the room is 21 degrees, and only when a woman comes and asks and says, why can't it be 24 degrees? These workplaces are designed for men by men. So our notion of careers is a ladder, and if you take a break, then you are penalized significantly for it. And women, on an average, take a lot more breaks than men. So why can't we actually create return to work pathways for women? Now we know of so many women who, they don't lose their mind because they have been out for 5 years. And it is not as if, you can just enter, but it will be a very fast ramp up if you are able to create a structure for return to work. And I think as a society, we have still not created those structural mechanisms to enable discovery of women who are wanting to return to work.
Absolutely. There are so many more rich questions here that I absolutely don't have time. But if you want to ask a question to any one of our panelists, feel free to catch them after it's over. So Vijay, I'll just take 2 more minutes to summarize. Somebody asked me a question saying, so what can men do about all this? I mean, a lot of these questions have been answered by Arundhati just now by Pooja. So just to give you one anecdotal example, I took over this company called Zensar in Pune. And at that time, we were a typical organization. We had hired 42% women at the entry level. And if you went to middle management, it's down to 18%. At top management, we were down to 1. Only the company secretary was a woman. And we had 12 men in senior management. And I remember getting a bunch of very bright young women together and saying, guys, you solve this problem. So they set up a group called Women for Excellence. And this was run by a very young South Indian woman called Pramila. And Pramila ran it with passion. I mean, to the extent that when I left or when I retired from Zensar in 2016, 15 years later, out of 17 people in senior management, 14 were women and 3 were men. To the extent that the men started coming to us and say, can we please start a Men for Excellence group? Because we're feeling very threatened. So the point I think Pooja made extremely well is that we have to design for equity. ICICI, the good old, the band of women who are so famous, from Lalita Gupte to Chanda Kochar to Shikha Sharma to Renuka Ramnath and so many others, they created workspaces supported by Mr. K.V. Kamath, who was very visionary male leader at that time, to make this happen. I took a lot of inspiration from Lalita Gupte, who now lives in Pune, and we kind of co-created these structures. So if we are genuine about our intent, and we act as per that intent, I'm sure that can happen. And as Arundhati rightly said, the problem lies as much in the mind of women as it does in men. So we have to collaborate to see that, look, we can make this an equitable workplace. So hopefully this last 1.5 hours has inspired any of you to go out and make it happen, both men and women. We would have served our purpose. And with that, thank you very much to this wonderful panel. And over to you, back to you, Vijay.